kind of the banking situation, which is very important, the whole mercantile structure of Los Lunas, which, to laugh how small it was, it's almost unbelievable. But Jim Williams. And by the way, if you have any questions, Jim's asked, interrupt us. You don't need to wait for the answer. Just raise your hand.
Yeah.
I recognize you and ask the question.
Let me give you just a minute to tell you where I'm coming from. I was born across the mountain between Estancia and Tahiti in 1923. That's a long time ago. And my family at the time had homesteaded some property and they were from the state of Texas. Well, like all of the people during those 20s and 29s and 30s, drought got them, finances got them, all kinds of things created moves they made. And my father and his neighbor were employed by the Santa Fe Railroad. They knew this gentleman from where I don't know. They might have taken him hunting. They used to have hunting dogs and go hunting. But the Santa Fe Railroad had acquired, as you know, every other section along the lines. That was their compensation for putting the rail lines in. Well, out at Grants and Blue Water, there was a Blue Water Lake, and there was some irrigation.
We pause for the latecomers. Be quiet, Ed.
There was some irrigation going on, but not very much, and Santa Fe wanted to develop that. So they hired my father and his neighbor with their teams of mules and horses and Fresnos, hand Fresnos, put behind, to go out there and do a lot of the work on the irrigation structures, which they did. And after they completed what they were supposed to do, they stayed there for 1 year and tried their hand at bean farming there like they did in the Estancia Valley. The beans grew great, the water was great, but a wind came up when they were in the shocks and literally blew them away. And they wound up, and the Navajo reservation was right there. And the Navajos, with everyone's permission, their permission, went out and literally picked up beans one at a time for their own use. And it was great. Everyone ate beans. I still love beans, I can tell you. And so anyway, when we left there, then moved to Albuquerque South Valley. And my father was growing vegetables, and there were some fruit trees. And I can't remember how long we lived there, but anyway, in 1935, he bought a place in Los Lunas, or El Cerro, across the way. How he ever convinced my mother to move down there is beyond me. We had no electricity, no facilities. I have a picture of the old house here, and I said that it's the worst old house that anyone ever lived in. And you can pass that around if you want to. It was 2x12s laid the flat way, and there was no depth to the walls. And they scabbed little pieces of wood on it and tried to plaster it with mud. You can see most of the mud had fallen off. And soon after that, or as soon as we moved, well, he started the process of building a house that was a little more modern than that one. And his ambition when they moved was to have his own place. He bought 58 acres. He gave $21 an acre for it. And that was a lot of money, I guess, in that time of their system.
Jim, are you in this picture, or are you in the picture?
Yeah, that's a picture of the house.
Are you in?
Yeah, I'm on the right-hand side, kneel down there, and that's two sisters of mine with me, and the three boys with the overalls are Texas relatives that were visiting. The,
You said that was
Land-
about 1930, what, 1938?
no, 35.
35.
Right. And the whole valley had become waterlogged over the years from the river overflowing, irrigation, and everything. And you can envision what the valley looked like in spots like the cattails are up by Esaletta when you go up the old highway there. And there's cattails that way every year. Well, there's cattails all over the valley. In fact, part of the farm that we bought had a spot where they grew. And a conservancy district had been formed, and it's a subdivision of the state of New Mexico. But the idea was that they would assess acreage enough to create a conservancy district, redo the irrigation canals, and put in drainage canals, which they did eventually. And they had started that project when we moved here, and the main drainage canal, the Tomei drain, came through the edge of our place. But these drainage canals drained the valley, and fortunately there's a lot of slope south. They drain and then dump into the river then. And really, farmland that had become waterlogged was very good farmland at the time. And the irrigation system was erratic and very undependable when the old Maradona system ran it. When the season was over, they needed to clean the ditch. Everyone was designated a short section that they would clean personally until they got the whole thing, the weeds out of it, clean for the next year. The Conservancy District was going to take over did take over all of those functions and put in new structures. The only thing they didn't do was guarantee it was going to rain. Some years we'd have water, and others we still didn't. And Cochiti Lake had not been constructed at that time. And once it was in, it stopped a lot of the lake flooding and also assured water that we would have. Okay, what were the crops grown? I'd like to just emphasize and explain what the native inhabitants, their type of livelihood was. Most of them had houses out of the valley or because of the flooding and the swampy conditions. And all of them had a little garden. They grew chili, corn, and wheat was a big item. And they all had planted wheat. What they do with the wheat? They would harvest it. What they didn't need, they would sell to the mercantile companies. They were candidates. But if they wanted to, and what they wanted to made into flour, they'd take to the flour mill. And the only mill still operating that I can remember was the one in Morales, south of Berlin. And they'd take their wheat down there and they would charge them, or they would pay for what they got in kind. In other words, they'd take 10 bushels down, well, they would get the wheat, the flour back maybe from 8 bushels or 6 bushels or whatever. And prior to that, the thrashing machine, all of them, when they would harvest their wheat, they would put it up in, kind of a round pile, stack it up with the grain inside. The grain would still be in the head. And the thrashing machine, there was 2 people that I knew that would come through after harvest and do the thrashing. All the neighbors would get together and they would help when the thrashing machine was there. And again, he took his pay in kind. And you can't believe that the measurement was in fanegas. And a fanega was, I really don't know, it was somewhat less than a bushel, about a half bushel. In fact, the Albuquerque Museum has an old fanega measure hanging on the wall up there. But everything was, you didn't talk about bushels or pounds, you talked fanegas.
You told me.
Well, this was a real community effort when everybody got together and did the thrashing. After the wheat harvest, this would be the latter part of June, or maybe the 1st of July. That stubble would be about that high where they cut the wheat. They would irrigate that and plant pinto beans for their own use. They weren't looking at any commercial reason to plant that. And the way they would do that was kind of unique. They didn't have planters. They would take a turning plow and a team of horses. Most of you know what a turning plow is. You go through and it turns the soil. And it would be damp. And they would turn over a furrow. And the guy would put some beans in a bag or a bucket, and he'd go along and drop it there. And then they'd come back and cover that up and maybe plow 2 more furrows before they put more beans in there. And really the ground was moist. They would come up. If they didn't get any irrigation water, which was very scarce in August and September, well, they had enough moisture there that they probably would come up and harvest enough beans to keep them for another year or two, maybe several at all. But I mean, beans was a big part of everyone's diet. And it was, and if they had a surplus of hay, and not only alfalfa, but if they had a little spot where the native hay, the Vega hay as we call it, was growing, they could cut that, have it baled, the mercantiles would take it. And I recall, I might mention too that my wife was born in Los Lunas, and her father was born in Isleta, so they were part of the community forever. And they would take any amount of anything that any of the people brought in, 2 or 3 bales or a bag or whatever, and they would sell it also. And the Simon Newstead Company at one time had a flour mill in Los Lunas. It was along the railroad track where the home furniture warehouse is there. But it was never in operation after we moved here, and it unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you will look at it, caught on fire and burned one night. So that was the end of that. So the only one that was operating was the one at Horizon. They actually still make flour down there. I don't know whether Morales. And Morales is right below Belen. And they don't trade or take wheat on in kind or anything. And of course they have to import most of the wheat that they use now because it's grown around here, but they still do operate that flour mill down there. What did we eat? I'll say this, we always had plenty to eat, but a lot of people didn't. I mean, there was a lot of hungry people, and it was pretty rough times then. But what we used to do is we always had a garden, and then we banked what we could. And the bank didn't refer to a bank where you put money. It was a bank that you dug a hole in, and any crop that grew underground, like your sweet potatoes, beets, turnips, rutabagas, anything like that, we dig a hole in the bank so that it's below the frost line, which wasn't but just a few inches. And we would put these items, carrots, turnips, potatoes, whatever, in there, and it's amazing how long they would keep. When they needed some, why, they would scratch off the dirt that they'd put on top, and these would be in a little that bag and take out what you wanted. Actually, the carrots would last longer than anything. They would last till springtime. But it was a good thing that we depended on. And we had meat, we had animals, we had milk, we had chickens, we had ducks and geese that we killed. The ducks were a menace. They were very destructive to any kind of a crop that was growing. And they were very good. You didn't need a license, or there were no game wardens. You just, when you wanted a duck, you got out and waited for them. And there used to be a gentleman that lived in Albuquerque that had bought a little tract of land next to ours and flooded it. And he had a duck club, he called. And they'd come down and spend the night. And it turned out that it was more of a gambling den than it was
Kept you in ducks, isn't it?
Yeah, right. One thing that I've thought of things that I'd forgotten about my whole life until he got me involved here. But having no electricity, we had what we call coal oil lamps. And I got to thinking the other day, what was coal oil? I thought it was kerosene. Well, I looked it on the internet and that's one and the same. Only the coal oil was actually extracted from coal beds. And I think it was in 1855, some gentleman figured out how to break it out of crude and make kerosene. But we use kerosene for our lamps. And I can't remember how soon it was after we moved, but my mother had a wood stove to start with, cook stove. But she wound up with a kerosene cook stove, and he had a kerosene heating stove. So it was a big item for everyone. Everyone had a lamp that they had, and if that's all they had. And a couple of years after we were there, we acquired a John Deere tractor that burned kerosene, that burned kerosene. So we would buy kerosene by the barrel rather than buy the can like we did before. And this interesting thing about this old John Deere tractor, they had a small 1-gallon gas tank on it. And you started it on gasoline and then switched it to kerosene. When the day was over, you were supposed to switch it back and burn out all the kerosene out of the carburetor. If you didn't, you had a real problem the next morning until you got all the kerosene out of there and could get it started. So what we were, my father's goal was to wind up with a dairy cow. And we were selling cream then only, and it was a common term to, oh, the cream did this or that. And they would buy any amount of cream that anyone produced, I guess. And what we did was put the cream out by the road every night, probably in a 2 or 5 gallon can. They would pick it up. But the thing that awakened my dumb brain was the separator that we used. And I don't know whether people remember the old separators or not. You turned them by hand. And it was strictly a centrifugal force that forced the cream is much lighter than the milk. But I'd like to see one of those now and look at it and just see how it worked. One spout for the cream, one for the skim milk. Skim milk had no value whatsoever, only to the farm animals, the pigs, the chickens, and the cats. We had a multitude of cats that were kind of wild, but they depended on your feed. And so it was, that was the kind of the beginning of the dairy. And the dairy retailers, I guess you'd say in Albuquerque, had a shortage of milk. They had been shipping in from the West Texas and places. And they had encouraged people to start producing grade A milk. Well, to produce grade A milk, first you had to have water, and running water, which we didn't have. But we were working toward that. And finally, I can't remember just exactly when it was, that we actually had the first grade A dairy in the area. And the city inspectors in Albuquerque were the ones that had to come down and certify that you could produce milk that was acceptable. Well, there was no refrigeration. So the way we cooled it was the well water. We finally, when we got electricity, we had a well with a pump and pressure tank. The well water was around 68 to 70 degrees. And you had a coil that, just like a radiator coil, only stainless steel, and cold water went in one side and circulated and went all the way through. On the top, you had a little trough with nails in it, holes in it, about nail size. And you poured the milk in there, had your water running, and of course the milk was body temperature, 98 degrees when you put it in there. And hopefully you cooled it down enough that it satisfied everybody. And we would then, at the bottom, there was another trough with a spout that it ran in a 10-gallon can or a 5-gallon can. And they picked the cans up then every day. And another interesting thing that I'd forgotten about, I was talking about beans. Everyone loves beans. So do the cows, but they like them cooked. Well, they're so solid, there was no way that they were edible. But my father, being from that Stench Valley, was familiar with, the elevators there and the people, and he knew this. So he took a 55-gallon drum, laid it down the flat way, and cut an opening in it. And then he built a firewall around it. And he knew and figured out how many, and he would get these split beams from the elevators over there, and it was just junk to them. They had to get it out of the way. And he figured out how many beans to put in there and how much water, and built a fire under it one time and just left it. And by the end of the day, those beans were cooked, and the amount he put in, it would be about full. And when the cows were in the barn in their stanchions, why, with dairy cows, you have to have a supplemental protein. And you either bought cottonseed meal or whatever you could to give them a balanced pricing. And we would give each cow, and they were stanching, a big scoop of beans. And sometimes it'd be real hot, and the cows would use their tongue and stir it around a little bit till they got where they could eat it. But it was a wonderful source of feed. Unfortunately, it wasn't something that you could depend on every day. because you didn't know what the bean crop was going to be or when the elevator was going to run or what's going to happen to it. But I mean, it was a pretty regular thing in the wintertime to have beans for the cows. And of course, the other animals, the dogs loved them too. Really, it was quite a deal. Okay, schools, what we learned, anything? I don't know if you're familiar with the valley or not, but Highway 47, as it goes on to Belen, the last settlement is Adelino. And Adelino was in the Los Lunas School District then, it's in Belen now. But there was a great school in Adelino. 2 miles up the road, there was one in Tomé. And another 2 miles up the road, there was one called San Fernandez. And it was right where the South El Cerro Loop intersects with 47. And then on a little farther, but on the hill, was El Cerro. And that's where I went to school. We had a little school room with a door in 2 rooms, and a door between them, and one teacher. And I went there the balance of 1935 and 36, I think it was. And, it was a good time. And what'd you do at recess? There was no playground equipment or anything like that. But everybody played marbles. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with marbles and how they work. And the rules were no playing for keeps. But that was hard to enforce. That was our introduction to gambling. You knew if you could get a few and keep them, and if somebody got well ahead, for a few pennies, he was willing to sell it.
Jim, how many students were there?
Oh, probably 10 or 12. Wasn't very many. And the reason for these distances between these schools really was there was no transportation. They were all in walking distance. And as transportation developed, why they went away. Well, and I was going to say the El Cerro School was where I went, but on farther north there was Valencia, South Valencia, and North Valencia, and then Peralta and Bosque Farms. But Bosque Farms was a new school. But they were, all up and down, but it was strictly a matter of being able to walk. And back and forth, I remember my younger sisters were just tiny, and they used to walk to San Fernando School.
Just that few students in 8 grades?
Well, there wasn't 8 grades. We went in, I'm going to sit down one more. There was a bus, if you want to call it that picked us up, and we went to the 8th grade in Los Lunas, where the administration, where the cannon is there, right on the highway. That was the grade school. And we went to the 8th grade there, and then went on to the high school. And there was a Chihuahua, or Chihuahuita, was a settlement south of Los Lunas. On Los Lunas Road, it went on south. And they had a bus, but it was a team of horses pulling a wagon with a little canopy built on it. And but that was the only transportation. That was far enough. They needed a little assistance to do that. And the high schools, when they picked you up when you got to high school, they were a truck with just a bed built on there and some benches in there, and then a few steps, and hopefully with something to pull yourself up with. And those were contracts that the school board let for a year's time for people to get back and forth to school. The schools were fairly good. I think they were as fine as you could expect. And the mercantile companies really played an important part in the community in not only buying produce and selling things, they actually kept money for people. There was no bank here. And they all had a safe, and I know their preferred customers. And the reason I know a lot of these things was my wife's father wound up owning Simon Newstead Company. He had worked there since a child. So I got a lot of information or knowledge from them. And but they were very instrumental in keeping things going. And talking about schools, when in 1919, I think it was, the merchants, Castillos and Simon Newstead, they were down on Los Lintas Road, and Huning Mercantile formed a company called Los Lunas Improvement Company. And the purpose of that company was to provide housing, which there was just non-existent, to get competent teachers to come to Los Lunas and teach. And this plot of land that they were going to build on is right south of where the water tower is now and where the administration building is. Well, and they had these were already in existence when I lived here, because they were formed. I have that certificate there of one of Mr. Tondry's, my father-in-law's, interest in it. But the four merchants, and I know they were the instigators of it, and Judge Owens, Dr. Whitmer, who was the doctor, and his old house is where Teofilo's is now, and the Oteros, they were the heirs of the Luna Mansion. Well, there was a number of people, and they built 2 duplexes and 2 single-family homes on that tract of land there, and leased it to teachers that would come here and teach. And in fact, they were there wasn't but 1 or maybe 2 occupied, as I remember, because that era had kind of passed. There was housing for teachers, transportation was better from Albuquerque, and Ann's mother, Mrs. Tondry, had wound up as the largest stockholder in that Los Lunas Improvement Company. And Ann and I living here, she depended on her to help her out with her investment and things. And that was one that she said, I'd like to get rid of that. That has no value to me anymore. And Fred Huning Jr. was the manager or whatever. And they were, besides 1 or 2 teachers that lived there, it was just a slum deal because they had gone downhill pretty bad.
And at the time you were in high school, is that what you said?
Yes, yes. And so anyway, it just rocked on and nothing happened there for quite a while, 2 or 3 years. So, and we kept thinking, what could we do with that? Well, I knew from talking to a superintendent that the schools would like to have that tract of land where their administration building is. That was their long-term goal, was to put that there. So Ann and I decided we would make them an offer for it. And Tony, my son, who's an attorney here in Los Lunas, had just gotten out of law school. And we talked to him, how complicated would it be? Well, it turned out there was 37 heirs of these people that had originally invested in it. Well, can you imagine who's going to spend the time to get that many heirs together? Well, I knew that the school wanted to buy it because the superintendent had told me in conversation that they would like to have it and put the administration building there. So Ann and I decided to make them an offer. And we did through Tony, and he contacted all of these heirs, 37 of them that were still alive that he could find. And of course, none of them refused an offer. You know, most of them didn't even realize they had any value whatsoever. So it took about a year for him to do this, but we finally got it done and closed the deal. And the superintendent at the time still wanted to buy it. We'd agreed on a price before it went before the board. Unfortunately, I was on the wrong side of the political fence at the time, and the board refused to buy it. So I traded it for some lots on South Broadway adjacent to our window and door company that we had built. And I told the guy, I said, look, here's what you can get for it, and here's who to go to, and I'll be out of the deal. In less than 30 days after I traded it to him, he had it sold to the schools. And that is now where the administration building is. But I mean, I like to point this out. This was a prime example of the things that these merchants would do. I mean, they were the backbone of the community. I mean, I've got a calendar there of the pictures of some of them, and the Simon Newstadt Company, big sign on it, for sale, buggies, windmills, everything. I mean, it was just, and the wholesaler was the company up in Las Vegas, Elfeld, Charles Elfeld Company. They were the importer through the Santa Fe Trail and the railroad then later on, and they supplied all of these merchants. And it was a very, very interesting time. Another school was the Los Lunas Training School. Are all of you familiar? Do you know what that is or where it is? Well, it's where the state police office is there. In the city of Los Lunas, where their new offices are, that was part of that Los Lunas Hospital and Training School. And what it was retarded children or impaired children, if they weren't retarded. And it was quite an organization. I mean, if you ever get a chance to, you can drive back there and see what an expanse it is. And they were one of the biggest employers in Los Lunas. And I don't know how this happened or when. All I know is that the federal government, I think it was federal, mandated that these children should not be institutionalized, that they should be put in private caretaker homes. And the idea was that they would delete the expense of this hospital, and they would investigate who would take them and how much to pay them and this, that, and the other. And in most cases, I think that worked well. In some, it was a disaster. I mean, there was all kinds of lawsuits filed against individuals for abusing the children and not taking care of them and this, that, and the other. But I think the bulk of them did fine. And the man that ran the laundry was my next door neighbor. And he had one of the inmates, or whatever you want to call them, that helped him in the laundry. And when this happened, he took him and put a little trailer in the backyard for him, and his name was Francis Shorthair. He was an Indian, and he's a deaf mute. He absolutely cannot speak a word, hear anything at all, but he's not done. And that's a perfect example of what a nice, good life that he was able to leave after, and he's still there. And the neighbors and all of us referred to him as the slave because he was always working every day. Holidays meant nothing to him. He didn't even know what they were. But he kept the weeds down and all, and he's in his 70s now. And unfortunately, Ramon, the man that took him out there, had a heart attack and died driving one day with Francis with him, close to Berlin. And he, and Francis was with him, and he knew he needed help. And he had pulled over to the side of the road, Ramon had. Francis went across the house to the house for help. And of course, with his emotions and no voice and this, that, and the other, they were scared to death of him and wouldn't let him in. And finally, somebody stopped, and of course, Ramon was dead. But really, that was an example of one that his life was probably much better than it was before. But there was some terrible scandals that developed. Another one that I might mention was, we referred to it as the honor farm. And that's now the prison down the road. And at the time, it was an honor farm. And just the, people that were on, had minor convictions and all, went down there. And at the time, my father-in-law had been appointed warden of the penitentiaries. So that's another reason I knew a lot about those. And what the function of that honor farm was to produce food for the walls, as they described the prison in Santa Fe, and the mental institution in Las Vegas. And on this honor farm, and we referred to it as the old Harlan Ranch. I don't know where we got that, but there was about 600 or 700 acres irrigated there. They had a dairy, they had a packing plant, they had a cannery, and they canned corn, beans, all kinds of things. And every day they made a milk delivery to Las Vegas, the hospital, and to the walls, as we referred to. And it was really a going concern. And the superintendent there, a fellow by the name of Virgil Kerfman, he was a very good farmer, and he was a very good with people. So, I mean, everyone thought the world of him. And again now, by some federal mandate, all that went to the wayside. And I don't know whether they, I'm sure that they said, well, it's not sanitary. It needs to be inspected, and this, that, and the other. But it did completely change the original honor farm, how it was operated. And then later on they put in the maximum security prison adjoining it. So, it was a nice accepted part of the community then, but I can't say that's really the way it is now. If anybody has any questions, well, don't hesitate to stop. I've got a few things. Well, and like the prison farm, like I say, I had it kind of with the schools. It wasn't a school, but they were supposed to be learning something there, those guys that were in there. And they did have classes for people. I know at the time I had a brother-in-law, after he got out of the service, he had a degree in agriculture. He used to teach a class there a couple of nights a week to people that wanted to go, and they had other classes for them. If I'm boring you, just tell me and I'll quit.
Not at all. What about high school?
Pardon?
What about high school?
High school was, the big high school still, it's right next to where the grade school was. And we had pretty good teachers, and I think we learned a lot. We had a couple that lived in Belen and one in Socorro that used to commute. And I can't remember, in my graduating class, we probably had 20 or 25. They didn't play football. They didn't have that. They played basketball, and I'm still mad about that. And I was then, and I'm still, because the basketball and teams was absolutely a closed issue unless you lived in the town of Los Lunas. And the reason they had was that we have no facilities to take anyone home after we've been on a trip. If they have to be where they can walk home. Well, that sounded pretty good, but it wasn't quite true. I knew, what a lot of us knew. And because there was one outstanding gentleman from Adelino that was on the basketball team. They used to figure out a way to get him home. In general, I think the schools were fine. I know of no one that had any trouble getting in college and continuing their education if they wanted to.
Did most people do that, or how many people that you graduated with went to college?
What?
How many people went to college after school?
Oh, I think nearly all of them did. Well, right at that time, though, it was right when they were being drafted, and some of the students had joined the National Guard just for the money, really. But then they were, but even those that went in the service and came back, like me, and went to school on the GI Bill, I would say most of the people did get a college degree that was going there.
Jim, were there any newspapers in the area?
The Belen paper was,
Belen was the only?
yeah, it wasn't any better then than it is now.
What did you do after high school? Did you get drafted and have to go?
Yes, I was in the service.
And you went to work?
I was in the Navy.
In the Navy.
And I've never seen the ocean until I hit San Diego as a draftee. And I was in the South Pacific when the war was over, and I was discharged Ann and I got married, and we really had not gone together before. We knew each other, but she was a couple of years behind me. And she was Catholic, I was a Protestant, and that was a no-no then. But we ignored everyone and married and lived together 65 and a half years. So, and after I got out of college, I went to work for a chemical. I got a degree in soil chemistry. And I went to work for a company out of Houston, selling fertilizer and pesticides. That was the height of DDT then, Everybody wanted DDT and BHC and all of that. And fortunately, the dealer they had in Albuquerque was, I didn't know him, but of course I acquired him then when I went to work for him. And he was from Boston. He was a chemical engineer and had been in the Air Force. And the reason he was here, he married a girl from Albuquerque that was back east going to school. He had a foul Eastern Bostonian personality. I was warned, numerous people, you watch that guy. It was an absolute lie. He was the most honest, forthright individual that I'd ever dealt with. And they just didn't understand him. They didn't give him time, but he talked fast, and he could make people mad quicker than anyone I've ever seen. But anyway, I did eventually, they transferred me to the other company to El Centro, California. And you know, if you're going to hell, that's a good place to get hardened for it. So after a couple, and he always said, if you want to come back, just give me a call and we'll. So I did come back and went to work for him. And then he and I separately formed a partnership, and we got involved in farming and real estate and all kinds of things. And eventually we bought a firm in Denver, one in El Paso, Fort Worth over the years. And we were, at the time, he was operating for, or doing the sales for the Albert Mitchell Company, who owned carbon dioxide leases up in northeast New Mexico. And that carbon dioxide deposit up there is not like it is in 99% of places. It's contaminated with sulfur and oil and gas and everything, but that is absolutely food grade pure coming out of the ground up there. And after doing the selling for a while, we actually acquired that as part of our company. And then in 1975, unbeknownst to us, the oil companies were speculating about piping that carbon dioxide down into the oil fields in West Texas. And we were approached by UGI Corporation. You've probably seen their AmeriGas signs. They're in the propane and carbon dioxide business. They purchased the company, and it was a stock tax-free exchange. So we wound up with stock and all in UGI Corporation. And you know, my boss stayed with him about 2.5, 3 years, and he quit. He just couldn't get along, even though he was from back there. I guess they were too much like he was or something. I don't know. But anyway, I stayed until 82, and I just didn't, the corporate life just didn't satisfy me. I was traveling all over the country, and I just decided to retire. I had 30 years in that they picked up from our little companies. And so I did. I retired in 1982 and formed a window and door company with 2 of my boys, which we still operate out of Santa Fe. And I've done a multitude of things. We always had some old house we were working on or doing, you know. I had to do that to keep 3 boys out of trouble. And, you know, really, when they were going to the university, my 2 oldest boys, they were framing for money, and they wound up forming their own framing company and did very well the times they were there. And we had bought an old house on Texas Southeast, right up there in the war zone, and it wasn't then. And Tony was married and Chris wasn't. But there was an apartment over the garage. Well, they lived in that while they went to the university, and we worked on it and sold it, and we made a nice profit on it. And I always split what we made with them. I mean, they were entitled to it. They did the work. So really, basically, I wound up back in Los Lunas with the Wind and Door Company and just piddling around, still piddling around.
Jim, I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned about the transportation problems like that, so many schools because people...
Right.
Now, up until 1937, Route 6 was Route 66.
Yes.
Okay, then it changed. What was the impact on the community of it going from this national highway to a local highway?
Well, it was pretty bad. Like the Simon Husted Company had put in some gasoline pumps. And like Mr. Tommy said one day, he said, you know, the only gasoline we pumped then was with people would come by, Okies, and we'd give them a gallon or 2 to get them on through town, you know what I mean? But it was very bad. And, you know, there was a campground up across from Teofilo's, and it closed. It affected a lot of people. And we always referred to the new road as the Laguna Cutoff up there, you know, from Albuquerque where it went to Laguna. But, there was very few roads paved down in this area. Highway 47 was just a corrugated, terrible road. Not down to the Y, it was part of the road, so it was good, but from there on to Berlin, it was terrible. And it was eventually paved. You know B.G. Burr, do you?
Yeah.
He's written some history books and all. Highway 47 South made me think of this. He took a picture at one time, and the highway department, I guess the highway, were restriping Highway 47 in front of his house. There was a dead dog right in the middle of the road there. They just painted right over Really, I can't think of anything else.
Questions? Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
Tell us about the telephones.
What?
The telephones.
You're right.
Well, the telephone book, maybe I didn't emphasize it enough. Anne's family were natives here. Her father was born in this letter. His parents came from France, and with the urging, I guess, of the Catholic diocese to come out this way. So they set up a trading post in this letter. So all of this stuff that's this old really came from their side of the family. And Anne was the only daughter that still lived in Los Lunas. Her brother lived in California and the others scattered around. Well, she inherited trunkfuls of things, like the old adobe mold there. And that's where this telephone book was, in the bottom of a drawer. When I was moving up here and cleaning things out, I found 2 of these. And I gave one of them to the museum here in Los Lunas. But
Show them the Los Lunas section.
yeah, the Los Lunas section, I put a clip on there, is this little section right here. And Berlin is next to it. And an interesting thing.
A through W.
Yeah. I couldn't find in this book, there was 2 of them, and I thought they were identical, but I don't think they were, because I read in a paragraph in one of them the ethics of talking on the party line. And it was hilarious.
Get off the line.
Yeah.
That was 1916, I noticed.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do you remember any? Do you remember any population numbers of when as you were growing up, how much it
No,
Los Lunas grew?
I sure don't. I really don't.
What about the land grants from the
Well, the old
side of the?
San Clemente grant was the Huning Ranch. I have no idea how that was acquired, but that was back 2 or 3 generations ago. And that included this area here, the Los Lunas Hill, and then about 100,000 deeded acres. And then on the other side of the river, and downward, you had the Tomei grant. And the Tomei grant was sold in the early 60s, I guess, or late 50s, to Horizon Corporation. And that's when the Country Club and Rio Communities sprung up there. And they sold lots all over. There's lots out there. I've had realtors tell me people would come from the east and want to see their lot. I couldn't even find it. He said they'd just wipe the tears away and leave, But it was a scam, really.
Jim, I have a personal experience on finding a lot down there. I visited down in Arizona one time, met a guy that just inherited a lot in next to the mountains down there. And he said, I don't even know where it is. I said, well, I'll go find it for you. And he gave me the pertinent data on it. And I did find it, but boy, it was difficult.
Yeah, it's really, it was, and there's just hundreds of lots out there now. And the thing is, the Los Lunas, the Valley Improvement Company, I guess they called it, they're the successor to the original deal. Well, they can't sell them. So nearly all of those now have reverted back to the state for back taxes. And what's the state going to do? They're not going to be able to collect those taxes from anyone. The county is the one that's really stuck on me. It's really a sad deal. And they crisscrossed that whole Tomei Grant with roads for it. And then on south of there was the Berlin Grant. And it joined the Tomei Grant and went down. And then the next one was the La Jolla Grant. Do any of you know where La Jolla is? Yeah, okay, the La Jolla Grant. And, La Jolla is a beautiful little community. The lady that cleans for me, she and her boyfriend bought a house down there, adobe house, for $600. And we're fixing it up. But really, when my children were in junior high, we used to go down there and take them for basketball games. They had a beautiful gym. It's still there. But La Jolla is just an absolute abandoned community. And it was one of the few along the river that really thrived. But as far as the La Jolla Grant, I don't know who it belongs to. I really don't. The Berlin Grant was sold to some ranchers. And I don't know what its ownership is now. But the Tomei Grant, that really, most of them, or I would say a lot of the Tomei people that had an interest in the grant or were heirs to the grant didn't want to sell it. Others did. And it wound up in a very bitter division of the Tomei people. And they finally sold it and established ownership. And when they did that, there was people that had a remote relative there. They filed suit, and the whole thing was thrown out as far as the settlement goes, and they had to include all of these new people. So really, they wound up getting virtually nothing out of it. Yeah.
Well, they say that that's one of the reasons that we don't get another road across the river to ease all the congestion on 6. Is that true?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
Well, that was the reason a few years back that it didn't go through though, wasn't it?
Yeah, right.
Because of the...
Of the Tomei,
Yeah.
Tomei Grant, something like
Yeah.
that?
Well, the people down there rose up in physical effort and just got in the way and said, no way, no bridge, no way. Remember that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's been a long, and the San Clemente Grant that the Hunings own, and still, they've sold parts of it to the Indian reservation, and they gave the hill to the village, which was great, but it was a tremendous tax deduction for them. The Tomei Hill was part of the Tomei Grant, and it remained with this Valley Improvement Company until about a year ago, and the Valley Improvement Company donated it to the Tomei Parish Church, the Catholic Church there. So they actually own the Tomei Hill. And there's always a procession at Easter time. And of course, I know the fellow real well that put the crosses up there originally. He was a little older than I am, but he was in the army in Italy, and he vowed if he got back, that's what he was going to do, was put crosses up there. He married an Italian girl and came back, built her a house just like the Italian style was. It's right next to the road. It's two-story box, and he said that's just exactly what she wanted. And he, one at a time, got those crosses and put them up the hill. And that was his penance for whatever he done wrong. Yeah, right.
We were talking earlier about how the locals grew things, et cetera, and a lot of the Spanish names for everything around here. I'm curious about languages back then. How much Spanish did you know, and how many?
If you talk Spanish when I went to grade school, they'd thump you on the head and may put you in, wouldn't let you go to recess. And it really, my boys talk very good Spanish. Tony can actually, he's done lawsuits and all totally in Spanish. But really, it was a penalty. You were not allowed to talk Spanish at all when I was growing up.
Patsy reflects that too. She
Yeah.
went here. The other interesting thing is the Spanish language as it's spoken in the Tomé area being still truly representative of the Spanish that came out of Spain in the 1600s.
Castilian Spanish?
I don't know.
You know, the Tomé settlement and people were about 10 notches above Peralta and especially Los Chagas and all. I mean, they were very industrious. And, you know, like the Bancas, they were very light complected. Most of them were blonde hair and all. They were, and of course, they never intermarried much with the others. But they were a very intelligent bunch. You go down there now, you see big farms, nice houses, and most of them are these original Tomé people.
Memories when you mentioned Peralta and Bosque Farms. Now, what was the relationship between people in Los Lunas and Bosque Farms? Because Bosque Farms, as I understand it, was a federally developed community.
Yeah. It was the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. And what it was, there was about 5,000 or 6,000 acres. And they, during the Dust Bowl and the drought and the terrible economy, there was people that couldn't survive where they were. And they formed this Reconstruction Finance Corporation and platted it in 40-acre tracts and built a house on them, adobe house, and started to import those people in here. And the first wave were absolute crud. And there was none of them that lasted too long. And then others came in, and they were a lot better. But there was always terrible friction between Bosque Farms and everybody else. And you know, when I was growing up, if anyone thought you were from Bosque Farms, they shunned you. They found out you weren't, well, you were their friend. But it was really the original people that moved in there that created the image that we're different, we're better than you are. And they really weren't. You know, talking about adobe, since the government cut those up in about 40-acre tracts, and they were proceeding to start dairies on them too. But they built a house on every tract, an adobe house, which was unusual, and it good. They're still standing structures. Well, they built these adobe homes with WPA labor. Do all of you know what WPA was? Yeah, Work Progress Administration. They're the ones that are the butt of all jokes, you know, about that administration. Anyway, I don't know how they engineered this, but they built a box about 5 feet square. And in the middle of it, they put a pole and put a metal deal in the bottom so it would turn. Went up through there and fixed it so they could hook a horse to it. And then in this pole that was inside the box, they made holes and put pipe through there. And they wound up making a pug mill, really is what they did. I don't know whether people know what a pug mill is, but really, it mixed the mud, and then you hooked the horse on that, and normally you just rode the horse and made him go around and around, and these pipes would go through this mud and stir it up, and whenever it got to the consistency and thoroughly mixed, well, then there was a gate there, and they'd open that gate, and it would push that mud out, and you'd put it in a wheelbarrow and take it and put it in the adobe molds. And they made hundreds of thousands of adobes up there like that. And we actually borrowed that deal when my father, got around to building another house after we lived in that one for a year. It worked fine. And we really didn't know where to, he wasn't an adobe builder or knew anything about it. So he got Simone Otero, who was an adobe maker along the hill. And he didn't speak any English, my father didn't speak any Spanish, but they got along pretty well. He showed my father a spot on our farm there that really was higher than the other, and concluded that that would make good adobes. And we set that box out there and made the adobes for the house that we built. And my job was to ride the horse around. But it was quite a struggle. You absolutely didn't have any money at all, And luckily, you mentioned high school. When I was in high school, we had an ag teacher, very, very nice person. And the state of New Mexico had just formed what they call a herd improvement association. And the idea was that dairies could test each cow's milk for butterfat content, since milk was sold on a butterfat content, and how much they would produce during their gestation period. And unfortunately, actually one of Patsy's older uncles was one that was ahead of me on this and taught me the ropes for it. But I was selected to do this, and we used to go to the Albuquerque Indian School, which was a huge institution where the Indians boarded there, and they had a farm and a dairy. We would test each cow's milk. You had an ear tag number for the butterfat content. And the idea being that after the end of a year, that the owner, the dairyman, could determine, is this cow productive? Is the butterfat high enough, or does she produce? It was a great program. And I used to make about $7 a month doing that. That was more money than I thought existed. And they used to board us for the weekend. It would be there in Los Lunas Ranch. That was Albert Sims' mansion and all.
Yeah, right in there.
Yeah, we stayed
right there next to the Indian school.
Yeah, well, across there. Well, anyway, he put us up there at night. This room was, I'd never seen anything like it. The cork floors, just had flowers in there, everything. It was quite an experience.
Any other questions?
Just a comment, for those that are interested in the pre-1937 Highway 66, the great race is coming through here on June 24th in front of Jubilee at 1:30 it starts. The first cars will be here about 1:30, so gather out in front before 1:30 on June 24th, and you find all these old cars racing on pre-1937 Highway 66.
One thing that might be of interest to you, we're talking about the WPA being the butt of all jokes. The one that I remember distinctly was, and of course this is maybe sacrilegious to tell it, but I'm going to. He went up the pearly gates, knocked on the gates, and they said, "What is your name?" He said, "Franklin Roosevelt." He said, "We don't want you up here. You're the man that repealed the 18th Amendment and the liquor's flowing down every street." So he went down below and knocked. They asked his name, he told them, can I come in? He said, no, you're the guy that sent the WPA workers down here and they let the fire go out.
That's a good point.
Thank
I may
you.
have one question if you don't mind me asking. I was just, photography, were there a lot of pretty pictures, outside of what might be in a museum or something that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Pictures, photography, just things that people took and things that capture what.
Did Tony mention that to you?
I'm sorry?
Did Tony mention it to you?
No.
No, let's don't. They know what it looks like. They know what they look
I
like.
can partially answer your question. Mr. Maurer, who he was talking about, historian,
Yeah,
he told me he's done a photographic book of Berlin and Los Lunas. He said Berlin was easy to do because there were lots of photographs. He said Los Lunas was so poor that very few pictures were taken. People couldn't afford cameras or film, and they had to really scrounge to find pictures.
yeah. The purpose of the recording and everything was my family, all of them, but these two sneaked off down here, are up at Regina where we're building a cabin, and they kind of schedule these on holidays, and they're nearly through with it. But anyway, Tony says, well, we'd like to know about you growing up too. So he's the one that arranged for the recording and everything. But this is my granddaughter and her boyfriend. They live in Phoenix.
Did you talk about the existing book on Los Lunas? There is a little book,
Yeah, no, I didn't. The one that
It's a
B.G.
photographic history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Is that the one that B.G. Bird
Yeah.
put together?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I know B.G. well. I have for years. I read the book and I said, B.G., I found a mistake in your book. He said, that's not unusual. And he said, what is it? And I said, well, you're showing that old-time baler of the horses going around there and say that they put the twine here to tell. I said, they didn't even know about twine then. That it was baling wire in bundles that had a loop on one end, and you stuck it through there and tied it.
one straight.
Yeah, right. So anyway, he laughed and I laughed. And I said, I'm not going to tell anybody.
Jim has a lot of materials that you might want to browse.
Yeah, one thing I think you might want I think is interesting is this Los Lunas.
You